حبيبي thank you.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Inshallah, we'll continue with chapters related to Najasa. Last week we talked about blood, where we ended, and we talked that blood is three types. The first is menstrual blood, and there's a consensus that's considered najas, and that's what the evidence from the Sunnah indicates. And the second type was blood with just from a person, from their vein or from their artery or something like that that's regular. And we said that the vast majority of the evidence indicates that it's Tâhir, but despite that, most of the scholars considered it to be najas. So even if we look at the actions of the Sahaba, radiallahu anhum, and the way they dealt with blood, and even in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, then we know that they dealt with it as being something Tâhir. So they would let people into the masjid if they were bleeding, whether it was from a wound or from prolonged bleeding or monthly bleeding. Even if it got into the masjid, they wouldn't make any effort of withholding it or to keep it from spreading anywhere. And we know that the Sahaba would have their own blood on them and would still pray, and some of it was due to wounds that couldn't be stopped, and some was small amounts that could be stopped, but despite that they would always pray. So I think in the end most of us ended up taking the opinion that it's considered Tâhir, despite the fact that most of the scholars considered it to be najas, just because there's a lack of evidence to show that it's najas, and at the same time there's an overwhelming amount of evidence to show that the Sahaba considered it Tâhir. So that's where we ended last week. So the next thing that the author mentions is pig's meat. So we talked, I think maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, about the pig itself while it's alive, and we said that the Mâlikiyyah and Imam Ash-Shawkânî later on considered the pig to be Tâhir while it's alive, but all of the rest of the Madhahab, the Ahnâf and the Shâfi'Iyyah and the Hanâbilah consider the pig to be najas while it's alive. So we talked about that, and that would relate to touching it while it's alive, or whether its saliva got on something like that. So that was when we were talking about the animal as it being alive. We said that the strongest opinion, though, based upon the evidence from the Quran and the Sunnah, is that it's considered najas while it's alive. So likewise, based upon that, then we know that if it's najas while it's alive, then it's even more deserving of being najas while it's dead. But we'll just go through the chapter that the author mentions, just so that we're completing the book. So the author says pig's meat, according to the verse, and he says Surah Al-An'am 145, quoted earlier, items mentioned therein are impure. The pronoun they, so he's فَإِنَّهَا رِجْسٌ, so that's what he's referring to. He says, so the pronoun they refers to all three of the mentioned items. It is, however, allowed to knit with the hair of a pig, according to most scholars. So this is all that he mentions because he went through the evidence earlier on. So we'll just go over it again quickly. So here the meat is specified, but with regards to the animal itself, like we said, some of the scholars said all that's considered najas is the meat, because that's all that's mentioned in the verse, أو لحم خنزير, or the meat of the pig. And some say that no, that when the meat of the pig is mentioned, then the point of it is the whole animal, because what is sought from an animal most likely generally is the meat. So if Allah considered this to be najas, then things that are less beneficial to people and less likely to be sought after are more deserving of being najas. So this is the discussion that they mention. And then they also mention the hadith that we talked about in Sahih Muslim, when the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever plays من لعب بالنردشير فكأنما صبغ يده بلحم الخنزير ودمه, or that the one who plays the nardashir is like someone who dyes his hand with the meat, or with the meat and the blood of a pig. So some of the scholars have used this to show that it's najas, because if it was to be considered Tâhir, then what would be the point of the Prophet ﷺ mentioning this as an example, or what it's like if someone plays with these games. So this is some of the evidence, and then like we said, the other ones say that no, what is mentioned is only the meat. So even according to the other opinion that it's only that the animal's tahir while it's alive, then it would be najas while it's dead, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the meat in the verse. So the meat would be obviously najas, and then secondly, the fact that if it's considered something that's forbidden to eat to begin with, then it wouldn't, as far as I know, as far as I've come across from what the ulama have said, is that it wouldn't be possible to slaughter it in the Islamic way and then say it's still forbidden to eat, but it's considered tahir because it's being slaughtered the correct way. So as far as I know, even according to the ones who say that it's tahir while it's alive, that the animal would be considered najas while it's dead, because it would be like any other dead animal, except for according to the ones who say it's najas while it's alive, it would be even worse. And according to the ones who say it's tahir while it's alive, then it would still take the ruling of any other najas dead animal. So this is just a kind of a recap of the discussion about the pig, because we went over it in a lot more detail in some of the earlier lessons.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Then would we also say that the hair is not permissible to use either of them? If you take the opinion of the ayah means the whole pig?
If we take that it means the whole pig, then technically I can't see why there would be a difference between the hair and between the skin, because unless we go back to when we had the discussion about is hair considered to be dead or not, and is the bones can be considered to be dead or not, because if that's the case, then the what do you call it, like the fluid from the body doesn't flow necessarily through the hair. There's no blood cells that go, or blood vessels that flow into the hair. If someone made that argument, but Allahu Alam, like unless there's a clear evidence from the Quran and the Sunnah to show that yes, the animal is najas in general, but the hair is an exception, then I can't see why there would be an exception to that.
And also, if the ones actually who consider the hair to be najas, they consider everything else as najas too. Like the bones are najas, anything comes out of it, it's najas.
Yeah, so I don't see why the hair would be an
exception.
exception.
For the pig, is like everything about him is najas.
Yeah, and if we say it's najas while it's alive, then it should be everything, including the hair.
Yeah.
As opposed to like when we said about the hair of a dead animal.
Exactly.
Because it's tahir while it's alive, right?
Yeah.
So the only reason it would become najas is because it died. But the hair isn't something that takes on that characteristic of being dead. So I can't see I could see a difference between the mayta and between the pig with the hair and everything.
Who said it was okay to knit?
He says that most scholars say it's allowed to knit.
Have you come across any?
I haven't read into that myself. Allahu Alam.
That is weird.
Yeah.
I didn't even know pigs had it.
Yeah, they do.
Well,
of course. No, even
they all have.
even
Every pig has hair.
Every pig has.
Not enough to knit, though, is it?
Maybe if you took the whole thing and made like a yarn out of it or something, I don't know. Allahu Alam.
Pig yarn.
So then it would be najas while it's alive or dead, right? For that, if you took that opinion about, because the meat is the most beneficial portion and everything else will become najas as well.
Yeah, if we say that it's najas while it's alive, then that means every part of it is najas. So I don't see the reason we said it would be allowed to use the hair and the bones and that type of thing of a dead animal was because we said it's alive. When it's alive, it's tahir, but it becomes najas when it's dead. So, but if we're saying that the pig is different than any other animal in the sense that it's najas while it's alive, then I can't see the evidence for using a dead animal to be used for a pig, because they're completely.
What is the exact evidence that it's najas when it's alive? Sorry.
Well, we said that the verse when Allah SWT says about the pig that it's najas, that its meat is najas.
Yeah.
So the Mâlikiyyah and Imam Ash-Shawkânî, they said that it's najas because, or what's najas is the meat. Allah SWT only mentioned the meat. But the majority say, no, Allah SWT only mentioned the meat, but what was meant was the meat and everything else, because when you refer to an animal, sometimes you can refer to it just as meat in general, and also because if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that the meat is najas, that's the most beneficial part of the animal. So if that is, then what about things that aren't from that? And then they give the example like when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about Yawm al-Jum'ah, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِذَا نُودِيَ لِلصَّلَاةِ مِنْ يَوْمِ الْجُمْعَةِ فَاسْعَوْا إِلَى ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَذَرُوا الْبَيْعَ. Or that if the salat or if the nida or the call is given on the day of Jum'ah, then rush to the remembrance of Allah and leave your sales or leave your transactions, your trades. So they say this, we couldn't take this and say things that are less than trade are allowed to keep doing. You couldn't say like you could keep, staying at a restaurant eating or watching TV because it's not mentioned in the ayah. If this is something that's so beneficial to people and you have to leave it, then other things are even more of a reason to be left. So they say this is similar to when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the meat of the pig, is that this is the part that people would use. So if that's najis, then how about everything else that's is unbeneficial? Yeah. So that's the point.
It's mentioned many times that khanzir is najis, like khanzir by itself, like mayta, like here in this ayah, like adam masfuh or lahma khanzir.
But it's always the lahm though, so that's why the other ones say it's tahir while it's alive. That's their argument. That if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only mentioned the lahm, so that's the argument of the Mâlikiyyah. They say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only mentioned the meat. The meat isn't the pig isn't meat when it's alive. That's their argument.
And they're the only ones that take that opinion?
The Mâlikiyyah and then Imam Ash-Shawkânî, like it was later on.
How would that benefit us in any way, shape or form?
To know that it's tahir while it's alive? If it was like, say you had a farm and it was running around and and it licked something, or could you touch it? Could you, if you found hair in an area and you wanted to pray there, would you have to remove the hair? So like it's when there's something from this animal, if it's considered najis or not, then you have to remove every aspect of that animal from around you and off of you and that type of thing. That's the argument. Is there anything else about the pig before we move on?
Did they urinate inside their stomachs, or is this is just nonsense?
What do you mean, like it doesn't come out?
I don't know. I never looked into it, but someone told me before they urinate inside their stomachs.
I never heard that.
No.
Wouldn't it probably be outside, right? Then do they die?
I know they
Excrement
eat their own feces.
Yeah.
No, it comes out of their stomach.
What do you mean you're like?
What?
Like they urinate in their stomach and then throw it up, you mean?
No, like
it just stays in there.
Yeah.
No.
They eventually explode, right?
Because it's excrement.
Water
It's called
pressure.
excrement because it
comes out, yeah.
comes out of the body.
They urinate inside their stomach, and then it comes out with their feces.
Well, I never heard that.
No, I don't know. I heard it before, but never really looked into it.
I think a lot of times, like especially with pigs, like if we know it's najas, people try to start looking for things to say, like this is why it's najas, because of this and because of this.
But they do eat their own feces.
Lots of animals do though.
True.
Like it doesn't mean that when we say that we're not saying but other animals are najas or pigs aren't najas. We're just saying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us it's najas. It's the end of the story. Whether we find the reason why they're dirty or not, that's kind of an extra thing.
Some people don't take the Quran.
But if this, like they'll say, and now pig's meat, it has, worms in it, and this, and like that's true. But even if it didn't, we'd still, shouldn't matter to us in the end, really. That's kind of like people always look for this is why, and this is why, and this is why. Like
Fruit has worms in it too, because of haram.
Exactly. So I mean, like.
But the type of worm and bacteria that pig has, they say if you iron it, like how hot is the iron, you can't kill it.
So it could, like, we don't say that, like, we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He'll do things for wisdom, but sometimes we'll understand it and sometimes we won't. If we don't understand it, it doesn't mean that it's wrong, and if we do figure it out, it doesn't mean that we know for sure this is the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbid it. Like, maybe there's some other reason, and this is kind of a secondary thing. So this is the discussion on pig's meat. So the next thing that the author mentions, he says, vomiting of a person, urine and excrement. So he says, there is agreement among the scholars that these objects are impure, but a slight amount of vomit, and he says commonly understood to be a small amount of liquid, and the urine of an unweaned male baby are overlooked and pardoned. it is sufficient just to sprinkle water over the urine of an unweaned male baby. And then he mentions the hadith عن أم قيس بنت محصن أنها أتت بابن لها صغير لم يأكل الطعام إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فأجلسه رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في حجره فبال على ثوبه فدعا بماء فنضحه ولم يغسله. So this hadith, he says, it's based on the hadith of Qais, that she came to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam with her unweaned son, so meaning he hadn't eaten food, he was still breastfeeding. He says, so after a while the baby urinated on the lap of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam called for some water, and he sprinkled it over his clothes, and he did not wash them. So he didn't wash completely. He just took some water in his hand and put it over the area where the urine was, and then that was sufficient for it. And then the author says this is related by Al-Bukhari and Muslim. And then he says, or then he mentions another hadith from Ali radiallahu anhu, that he says that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, يغسل من بول الجارية وينضح من بول الغلام, or that the urine of a baby boy should have water sprinkled over it, while the urine of a baby girl is to be washed off. And he says Qatada said, so Qatada, he's from the Tabi'een, from the generation after the Sahaba. He said, this refers to a male baby that has not yet begun to eat. If he already eats, then the garment is to be washed. And this is similar to like the earlier hadith from Qais, that it mentions in the hadith itself that the baby hadn't eaten yet. So this is the second thing that the author mentions. And then he says this hadith is related by Ahmad, Abu Dawood, at-Tirmidhi, and Ibn Majah. And in Al-Fath, Ibn Hajar says its chain is sahih. So it's Fath al-Bari, the Sharh of Sahih al-Bukhari, and so Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani saying that this chain was sahih. Yeah.
I'm confused because wouldn't it not matter if it's a grown man or a baby, because there is that hadith about a man who stood up in the masjid and urinated, and he says finish and just pour water on it. Wouldn't it be like insignificant for it to be a small baby or an adult?
It would, except that we have this hadith.
Oh.
Like we have this hadith that shows that the Sahabiyya Qais understood that when she brought the baby, she saw that the Prophet ﷺ didn't wash his clothes. He just sprinkled water on it, and she mentioned that the baby hadn't eaten yet. And then in the hadith from Ali radiallahu anhu, that the Prophet ﷺ said that the young boy or the baby boy's urine is to be sprinkled water upon it, and the urine of a baby girl is to be washed. So this is the second hadith that the author mentioned from the Prophet ﷺ, and he said that Ibn Hajar called it sahih. It was also accepted by Imam al-Bukhari and ad-Daraqutni and Ibn Khuzaymah and Ibn Hibban and Al-Hakim accepted it as being marfu' to the Prophet ﷺ, because there's two narrations of this hadith. One is from the Prophet ﷺ saying it, يغسل من بول الغلام من بول الجارية وينضح من بول الغلام. So there's one from the Prophet ﷺ like we have here, and then there's also another narration in which Ali radiallahu anhu said it himself. So some of the ulama said that it's authentic from Ali, but it's weak from the Prophet ﷺ. But others said no, it's authentic from both. So Ali said it sometimes, but the Prophet ﷺ said it. So this is an issue when it comes to the sciences of hadith, where the scholars might differ about, is it authentic from both, or does the fact that Ali said it show that it's actually not from the Prophet ﷺ, and one of the narrators mixed up and thought that it was from the Prophet ﷺ. This is another issue that it would be long to discuss, but the short answer is that this hadith, the stronger opinion is that it's authentic from both. It's authentic that Ali himself said it, and it's authentic that the Prophet ﷺ said it. Ahmad and Abu Dawood and at-Tirmidhi and Ibn Majah.
So let's say if it's authentic from the chain of narration from Ali, it's authentic.
Yeah.
But from the Prophet ﷺ is not authentic.
Yeah.
So will we still accept the hadith?
We would accept it from his statement, but then the issue is is this something that there could be ijtihad for? And then we say, well, this is only Ali's ijtihad, or is it something that couldn't be from ijtihad, so he obviously got it from the Prophet ﷺ but didn't mention it? Allahu alam, if it wasn't authentic from the Prophet ﷺ and we didn't have anything else from him, this could be something that's from ijtihad. Seems like it could be from ijtihad.
What if it was the only narration that we have from a companion? Will you still take it, or you look at the rest if they have something, different?
Well, if we only had this from Ali, we didn't have anything from the Prophet ﷺ, we didn't have the hadith of Qais about that this happened. If just all we had was Ali said, you wash the urine of a girl and you sprinkle the water on the urine of a boy. If that's all we had, then Allahu alam, it wouldn't be enough to say that it's Allahu alam, because we have other evidence that bawl in general or urine is najas.
Yeah.
So if all we have is a statement of a sahabi to say this doesn't include it, and there's only one of them, Allahu alam, because it could be something from ijtihad.
Yeah, but this is authentic.
But this is it's authentic.
Yeah.
Plus we have the hadith of Qais where she said the Prophet ﷺ did this. So I mean we have
evidence.
Yeah.
Haytham, why the girl wash and the boy sprinkle?
We don't have anything from the Prophet ﷺ about it, so we can't say for sure. But the ulama, some of them mention something. So some of them say that the reason why is that the boys people tend to carry boys around more. So if they had to wash from the boy's urine, it would be too much of a hardship, while they're less likely to carry girls around. So it's less of a hardship. That's one explanation. Another explanation is they say that it's something to do with the actual, the makeup of the urine of the male and the female. Again, we don't have any evidence for that from the Quran or Sunnah. Plus, even scientifically, as far as I don't know if there's anything even.
So it's just things that just pop. I mean,
there's nothing for it. So in the end, we can't really say this is the reason. All we say is we accept it.
Okay. And you said the vomit is Tâhir?
We're going to go through that inshallah.
That's exactly what was my question. Are we going to divide them or just do?
We'll divide them into 3 or 2.
Oh, I thought you already finished.
No. I just read what the author said.
Okay.
So this hadith, like we said, it was accepted by Al-Bukhari and Ad-Daraqutni and Ibn Khuzaymah and Ibn Hibban and Al-Hakim and Ibn Hajar later on after them accepted it as authentic from the Prophet ﷺ. So then the author continues, he says, sprinkling is sufficient as long as the boy is still nursing. If he eats solid food, his urine must be washed from the clothes and body. There's no disagreement on this latter point. Perhaps the reason for this exemption, so this is the author mentioning, he says, is because male baby's urine is thought, or is that people have a tendency to carry their male babies around, and it would have been difficult to clean the clothes after their frequent urination. So this is one of the reasons that the ulama mentioned. Like I said, there's other ones that they say that it's something to do with the makeup, and there's other opinions as well, but none of them have anything from the Prophet ﷺ. Yeah.
Like baby food, is that considered food or no?
It's
Yeah.
So if the baby eats baby food, his urine is najis.
Means water.
Well, it would be najis either way. The cleaning of it would be a bit different.
Oh,
It's still considered najis because you still have to do something with it.
So I guess my question would be, if he was eating baby food and he urinated on his father, would you sprinkle or would you wash that garment?
If he's eating baby food regular, that's,
It's considered food.
It's considered food. Yeah, it's just
not
mushed
milk.
up.
Okay, so
It's not just because if you had to wait until they eat solid food, it might be 3 or 4. Until they're eating completely solid food only, like the way adults
eating
do.
solid food.
Do that.
Everything the same as you though?
No.
Of course.
Food is just considered anything besides the
Besides the milk, except for the only exception would be when they're born and you do the tahniq, like when you put the date in their mouth, because the fact they used to do that, and then we have this hadith, we can't say that would be enough to be considered solid food. Yeah.
okay, so there's a period where the baby just is breastfed.
Yeah, sometimes 6 months, 8 months, depending on the parents, what they decide. So this is the issue of or this is what the author mentioned. So now we'll divide, or we'll add some commentary on what the author said. So the first thing that he mentioned. Yeah.
The question regarding the baby girl.
Yeah.
If she wear the cloth of suppose of a mom or something,
Mhm.
so I have to take the whole cloth and wash it, or just the area of where she feed or something?
Just the area. But you have to wash it thoroughly though. Like it has to be all the way through, and every part of it has to be like soaking, so there's nothing left. But it doesn't have to be the whole clothing. Yeah. So he said. So the first thing that.
Sorry, but let's say if there is a drop.
Yeah.
So you wash it till actually you see the water going through and
till you know it's there's no urine there anymore.
Okay.
It pushed it out.
And not like 1 or 2 or 3 times, just
as long as it's done.
Don't we have the hadith
if it
about-
doesn't one's enough. If for some reason because of the type of material it takes 5, then you do it 5. Like, there's no number. Yeah.
Don't we have that hadith about to wipe it and like until you can't see anymore because of that? Remember, there's that hadith about, I can't remember which Sahabiyyah. It's she said there was menstruation blood in her clothing, and Prophet just said wipe it, not like.
No, he said to scrape it and then wipe it with water and then wash it with water.
Oh, okay.
Like,
so it's washing basically.
So it's washing, yeah.
Okay.
And then there's other hadith that if there's still a stain left, that doesn't matter. Like, but the actual ayn or the thing itself is gone.
Yeah.
So same thing would be with urine.
Urine in general is najis.
Yeah.
Except for it's najis.
It's still najis,
we
but
all have to wash it under all circumstances except for
unweaned baby boy. You just have to like pour water or sprinkle it with water. Yeah. So the first thing he says is the issue of najasa, of the vomit. We can say that there's either 3 or 5 opinions about it, depending on how we divide it. So the first opinion about vomit is that it's considered najas, and that's the opinion of the majority of the ulama. So vomit is considered najas according to the Ahnâf and the Shâfi'իyyah and the Hanâbilah.
It's considered najas.
Yeah, according to those.
According to the Jumhur ulama.
Yeah, the Ahnâf and the Shâfi'իyyah and the Hanbalis. So they consider vomit to be najas. Shâfi'իyyah and the Hanâbilah.
Considered to be najis?
Yeah.
Hanbali as well? Yeah.
So these are the 3 madhahib that consider it to be najas, and under all circumstances. So that doesn't matter, how old the person is. Doesn't matter what it looks like. It doesn't matter if it's a baby or not. It doesn't matter if it still resembles food or not. Anything that comes back out of your stomach is considered najas. And what we mean by that is because there's when it's actual vomit. If something comes in your throat and goes back down, that's a separate topic. We'll talk about that another time. So when someone vomits, that was the first opinion. The evidence that they use is a hadith. It's from Ammar ibn Yasir radiallahu anhu, that he said, or the Prophet ﷺ said to him, Ya Ammar, إنما يغسل الثوب من خمس من الغائط والبول والقيء والدم والمني. Or that from Ammar ibn Yasir, that the Prophet ﷺ said to him, O Ammar, clothing is only to be washed from 5: feces, urine, vomit, blood, and semen.
يغسل الثوب.
الثوب من خمس. So they use this hadith from Ammar, is narrated by Abu Ya'la in Ad-Daraqutni.
من خمس
الغائط من الغائط والبول والقيء والدم والمني.
Can you say them in English, please?
Yeah, it's from feces, urine, vomit, blood, and semen. So this is the 5 according to this hadith. And this hadith was narrated by Abu Ya'la in his Musnad, and Ad-Daraqutni in his Sunan, and Al-Bayhaqi. Abu Ya'la, Ad-Daraqutni, and Al-Bayhaqi.
And they said those 5 are always to be washed.
This is according to this hadith. So this is the first evidence that they use.
The hadith, it's authentic as well?
No, it's very, very weak. This
This
hadith.
hadith.
It's extremely weak. Yeah.
I know.
You should ask first then. You have to be on top of things. Well, like I said, the point is
No,
because
it's good-
someone
it's good to
comes to
know,
you
no.
now and says, well, what about
Yeah,
this
it's
hadith?
good to know, but
You need to know what's authentic and what's not.
I don't think you really need that to
Oh no,
to
but
figure
actually
out to
people,
wash your clothes. Like it's,
people gonna use
Well,
it.
whether you have to or not.
That's right.
well,
Oh yeah. Ow.
I'm pretty sure if you get any five, you're gonna wash it anyways, you know.
Well, I mean, normally you would, but I mean, do you have to or not? That's the thing.
Oh, as in like, let's say like you get, for instance, blood on your shirt and salah's right away, for instance, then you have to wash it before.
According, yeah, like if we
If
were
it was
to, yeah,
authentic.
yeah.
If you,
If it was.
if you consider it najis.
If you consider it
If
najis.
it was
Well,
authentic.
we talked about that last week. Right?
Well, we talked about that last
Yeah,
week.
About the
yeah.
blood, it's not najis.
Yeah, I'll just, it's a quick question.
Okay.
Okay, if I cut my finger right now,
Yeah.
a little tiny blood, can I go like this or no?
Allahu Alam, I don't know.
Okay.
Probably not.
No, huh?
No.
So it's better not to not suck your like thumb that's bleeding or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the first opinion, and one of the evidences that they use. They also say that this food is the food that you're throwing up. Or obviously, when you throw up, 99% of the time it's going to be some food, unless you haven't eaten for a long time and you're throwing up. So they say that this is some food that's changed now. It's become something like netin, or it's become something filthy or decayed and something like that. And you can't use it for anything. Like obviously, it'd be haram to use it if someone even wanted to. So they say now it's like urine. So they say that it's similar to urine now, and we know urine is najas. Then they say that this is an immediate qiyas on that. So that's the second argument that they use. And the third thing they say is that vomiting, according to some of these people who take this opinion, if you throw up, it breaks your wudu. So they say this is something that came out of your body from other than the two paths, so from front and back, and so the fact that the reason why it nullifies your wudu is because it's a najis thing that came out of your body. So this is what they say.
So there is no other dalil except the Haytham that they use.
But there's a few other things, and we'll talk about them. So those are what they use, and then they say. So what they say that the evidence that they use that vomit nullifies your wudu. They mention the hadith from which I don't know if we talked about it before. I don't think we talked about it before. But it's from Ma'dan ibn Abi Talha, from Abu Darda, that he mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ قَاءَ فَأَفْطَرَ فَتَوَضَّأَ. So that the Prophet ﷺ threw up, so he broke his fast and he made wudu. So they mention this hadith is narrated by Tirmidhi. So they say here that this proves that when the Prophet ﷺ threw up, he broke his fast and he made wudu. So they say this proves that vomiting nullifies your wudu, and if it's something that came out of your body from other than the two paths, the only reason it would nullify the wudu is because it's najas. This is their argument.
Is that
Is it
authentic?
hadith?
This hadith, it's one hadith, there's so much dispute from the ulama of hadith about it, whether it's authentic or not.
Mm-hmm.
Allahu alam, whether it's...
So even that's not solid.
Even that's not solid, the hadith, so even if we were to, let's say for the sake of argument, we accepted the authenticity of the hadith,
Okay.
does saying that the Prophet ﷺ vomited then made wudu, does that prove that it nullifies wudu, or does it just prove that this was the order in which he did things?
Yeah.
Yeah, he could have made it
It could have been
Exactly,
broken
that's
already,
what
it could have been,
4 hours.
you wanted to make, because we know that the Prophet ﷺ would make wudu for every salat. There's so many reasons why we can't use something that vague to say that vomiting nullifies the wudu. Even if we said it nullifies the wudu, what's the evidence that it nullifies it because it's najas coming out of the body from somewhere else? Like all these, you'll see how here they make this condition and then they make something on top of it and then they make something on top of that, when the beginning condition didn't really have a clear evidence to begin with. So it's like a weakness on top of weakness on top of a weakness to say something like really, there's no evidence to begin with for it.
Isn't there an authentic hadith of a man in Salah, he puked like in his mouth?
Hmm?
And I'm not sure what happened to him, but he then went to Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he asked him, "Is my salah broken?" And he told him no.
Well, I never heard that myself.
No?
No.
How about the hadith from Aisha, where what breaks your fast is what passes through your throat?
Yeah, but that's coming out of your throat.
Yeah, that's what I mean. If you could use
Plus,
that
if that's about fasting, this
That's-
is about
yeah.
salat. Like
Yeah,
it's,
exactly.
Yeah.
It's not najas, but maybe it's-
it's I mean, even if we said it breaks your wudu, like we know eating camel's meat, which we'll talk about later on, the strongest opinion is that it breaks your wudu.
Yeah.
It's 100% tahir according to, there's a ijma' on it.
Actually, no.
And it's actually putting it in your body. So what's the evidence that something coming out of your body because it broke your wudu is, I mean, there's so many like weaknesses in that argument. Or at least that's, what I see. But
Like even like you said, even if it was 100% authentic, who knows if that's the reason why he made wudu afterwards, right?
yeah.
So,
And they also mention another hadith from Zayd ibn Ali, from his father, from his grandfather, so from Ali ibn Abi Talib, that the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-Qalasu hadath, or that regurgitation is a hadath, which means that it breaks your wudu. And it's narrated by Daraqutni, but it's extremely weak. It contains, one of the narrators is Siwar ibn Mus'ab, and he's matruk al-hadith, or his hadith are abandoned. So, but this is another evidence that they used to say that vomiting would nullify your wudu. So because it nullifies your wudu, we know it's najas. So again, it's based upon a number of...
all the hadith they're using da'if.
Yeah.
It's da'if in their cause.
Yeah. But some of them would consider it authentic, or they'd say there's so many of them, it strengthens each other. But I mean, like we say, like they're not authentic on their own, and when something is that weak, then we'd say they can't strengthen each other. It'd be like if one liar comes and tells you something, and another liar comes and tells you something. Like the fact that they're both telling me that it actually makes me think it's even worse, because why are all these liars coming and telling me something, and no one who's trustworthy is telling me this thing?
yeah, because I hear a lot of all these weak hadith, they can strengthen each other, but it wouldn't be the opposite that like.
It depends. Like say, if the hadith contains someone who just has a slight problem with his memory, but he's a trustworthy guy, and in another hadith, there's a different guy who's a slight problem in his memory, but he's also trustworthy. Those could strengthen each other.
No,
Because you say, well, I trust the guy. We don't always accept what he says because his memory is a little bit weak. But then there's another guy who's a little bit weak as well, and he says something that's the same. Just like in everyday life, if some guy who sometimes he mixes stuff up, tells you something, and another guy sometimes mixes something else, mixes stuff up, tells you the exact same thing. You say, well, the fact that two of these guys, sure, maybe they're not trustworthy 100% from their memory, but they both said the same thing, is different than two guys that they make stuff up all the time. So you'd be like, well. But yeah, and then like, well, why are I never heard it from anyone trustworthy except for two liars that walked in and told me the same thing. It's like, how can I strengthen each other? So this is, like we said, these hadith are extremely weak, so they wouldn't strengthen each other. So this is the first opinion and the evidence that they use. The second opinion.
So that's done with the evidence.
Yeah.
For this one. So
For this
nothing
one.
authentic, basically.
Nothing.
For this.
There's some other weak hadith about performing wudu from throwing up, but it doesn't talk about the najasa, so it's just more of the same.
Yeah.
But they're also weak as well. The second opinion is that if it's changed at all, then it's najas. So even if you throw up and it's food, and it's changed even a little bit, even just in the smell, that it smells sour or it smells rotten at all, that it's considered najas. So that's the second opinion. And لو قاء وتغير حتى بالحمضة يعني بالحموضة أنه يعتبر نجس.
Vomit, of course, will change.
That's what they say. They say if it's changed, then it's najas.
There is vomit doesn't change.
Stomach acid.
Maybe if you threw up and right away you threw up some food again. Allahu Alam.
Because you have your foods that were in
That's the thing, is if it's practical or not, Allahu Alam, but that's what they said. So I mean, whether it's practical.
Smell it. Even if the food didn't change, your enzymes are still there. All the water.
No, but he's saying, like, for instance, you eat and then
Unless it was just the food that came up,
right away you
which is unlikely, but like sometimes there'll be opinions that you think I can see it theoretically, but practically it's not going to happen. So
So the first opinion where vomit is always najas, that's weak. And this opinion you said is that vomit is najas.
If the food is changed at all.
If it's changed at all, then it's najas.
Yeah, even if it's just the smell or anything like that. And that's the opinion of Al-Hasan from the Ahnâf, and it's the main Mâlikî opinion. and it's one of the Shâfi'î opinions.
Sorry, is it Ra'ihu?
Al-Hasan
Hasan
from
Ahnâf?
the Ahnâf. It's the main Mâlikî opinion. So most of the Malikis took this opinion, and some Shafi'is took this opinion.
رأي عامة المالكية.
Yeah. No, that's Najas. We're talking about Najasa right now only.
And who else? Mâlikiyyah as well.
Some Shafi'is. The third opinion is that it's considered Tâhir unless it begins to resemble feces, which Allahu A'lam whether that's possible, because I mean بدأ يعني يشبه الغائط. Allahu A'lam if that's even possible physically.
Maybe he meant to know the thickness or the texture
Allahu
of
But
it.
Johnny, it's more like I'm thinking what he means is that it's more altered than it is food, Yani.
It could be, yeah, like if it's closer to one than the other. Allahu A'lam. I mean, that's the reason they say that is some of the arguments that are mentioned before, or they make almost that it's become najis now because it resembles this thing. So I mean that's.
But like the man Allah A'lam, like how you said, they're not even possible. So those last two opinions are not even practical, even without.
Not
any
very
evidence,
practical,
you know?
no. And this third opinion is the opinion of Ibn Rushd and Al-Qâdhî Iyâdh, and they're both Malikis.
So and they said that this vomit is.
If it's Tâhir until it starts to resemble.
How many opinions is this?
5.
Oh,
So that's the third.
I'll come back to comment.
And the fourth opinion is that the vomit of any animal, so a human or any animal that's not edible, would be considered najas. And that's
Including the human being.
yeah, obviously, yeah. So the human being, which is it's very similar to the first
So
first
najis in
opinion.
general.
Najis in general, yeah.
Any feces of an animal that's not
Vomit.
Any vomit of the animal that's not edible is considered najas.
So no, it would be considered najas. Yeah. So any animal, which obviously human is inedible, then their vomit would be considered najas, and that's some of the Hanâbilah
So
mention that.
any animal that is inedible,
Yeah.
then their vomit is najis.
Yeah. But for example, like a cow, say, I mean, you had a farm and you walked in some vomit from an animal that you're
Camel or an
something like that, then it would be considered Tâhir. And they say because if you can eat the animal, then what about something that just comes out of the animal? That's a separate discussion we'll get into like in another time. So that's the fourth opinion. The fifth opinion is that it's considered Tâhir.
طب رأي مين هذا؟
بعد الحنابلة. أو حتى يعني جمهور it's the opinion of all the Hanabila essentially. The only difference between the first opinion is that they said that any the first one's talking about human, the other one is talking about any animal that's inedible.
So any animal that's not edible is najis. The vomit.
He's talking about the vomit, yeah. Just
That was
here.
for the fourth opinion.
For the fourth opinion, yeah.
So the vomit from an animal is not najis, but the vomit from a human is najis?
No.
No, because we can't eat humans, either. So that would be najis is what they're trying to say, right?
If
So a
an
dog,
animal
a
can eat
cat, any animal you couldn't eat, that would be considered najis. If you had a cat at home, according to them, they'd say that the vomit if from a cat would be najis. So if it threw up or whatever,
Well,
then
from a sheep, it's not najis.
it wouldn't be, because you can eat the animal itself.
But
So
like,
that's
how does when does such a ruling, like of an animal that's edible, for example, you take the ruling you apply to humans because an animal that's not edible, you take the ruling you apply to humans because they're not edible. Like, when does this ever came in like stuff like I don't know.
No, what's the basis for that? Seriously.
Yeah.
There's no hadith or ayah.
Is this used?
well, they say that's the thing. A lot of this stuff is just based upon just understanding or using rules or trying to apply rules. But they'll say, for example, if we can't eat an animal, why can't we eat it? Because it's najas. So anything that comes from it is najas. So a human, we'd say everything from the human would be najas except for what we have evidence for, and then they'll make exceptions to it. So that's kind of what the argument would be.
Well, that's
Yeah.
okay.
So then the fifth opinion is that it's Tâhir, and that's the opinion of Imam Ash-Shawkânî, and some statements of Imam Ibn Hazm kind of indicate that he considered it to be Tâhir. And the argument that they say is that there's nothing to show that it's najas. So if we say that all the evidence is weak, that it's najas, and if the evidence that it breaks the wudu is weak, and even if it was authentic, it doesn't prove that it's najas. So they say the asl or the default ruling about anything is that it's tahir until we have evidence to prove that it's najas. So until you prove to us that vomit is considered najas, we can consider it tahir.
So just Imam Ash-Shawkânî Ibn Hazm, that's it? That's their opinion?
And then from nowadays there's lots, like Sheikh Sulaiman, that's his opinion,
that's
and
lots of
nowadays.
The recent ones, they take that opinion.
Yeah. But like you see, like the vast majority took that it's considered najas. And so they go through, they'll say, well, this hadith is weak, this one is weak, this one is weak. Even if it was authentic, the fact that something breaks your wudu doesn't mean the thing that came out is najas. All these rules that you're bringing are weak. So how can you say that something is najas, especially if the thing that went in was tahir, and it's not changed into a najasa yet, like it hasn't come out as.
You can't compare what's in the stomach to the.
It's a completely different thing.
It's a whole different thing.
Yeah. So they say.
Because what's in the stomach is supposed to be for your body, to strengthen your body, so it's gonna.
The stuff that comes out later is the waste. It's the waste that's nothing to.
Yeah. It's gonna stay in your body. It's not gonna go anywhere.
Exactly. The nutrients are being taken from the stomach still, right?
Yeah.
So that means it's good.
They take and even later on even.
Exactly.
Kind of further down.
Usually, everything gets mixed up in the stomach, so it's mixing up with
acid
proteins,
and
enzymes, acid.
Break it down and everything.
It's broken down actually even further probably, but when you go to the small intestine, because that's the second part, all the nutrients are absorbed. And then you go to the large intestine, like they say, little nutrients is absorbed, so it's just
mostly waste now.
So I highly doubt I would go from the large intestine to your small intestine to your stomach, to your esophagus, to your pharynx, to your mouth. Like
not from my experience, no, I don't think so.
So that's why why I said the other opinions are kind of very impractical, right?
That never happened to them.
And then even to consider something from the stomach najas, if you look at the stomach and the biology of the stomach, it would go back to, remember the cheese, and we said the enzyme. So the stomach has lots of enzymes in it. It's just to break down food. And we have a buffer in there. So I don't see something that would make food najis unless I think they're more disgusted of it.
That's the thing, and we can't always say that there's a tie between something being disgusting and something being najas.
It is nasty, but
because there's lots of food that people will eat. Some people will think it's the most disgusting thing I ever saw in my life. How can we say it's najas though? We can't even say it's haram, let alone that it's najas. So this is the evidence in that for these 5 opinions. What do you guys think?
I think all of them are weak except
number 5.
Yeah, I think it's tahir.
Because like you said, there's everything. The general rule, everything's tahir to proven najis, right? And all those hadith are weak, and all those opinions are weak and stuff. So nothing proves it's najis. So it's tahir, right?
Yeah. That's what I think. Yeah.
So the adult who vomit or the child vomiting the same we consider, right?
Yeah, so a child vomiting would be considered tahir. So if it got on, the parents' clothing, they won't have to. I mean, they can wash it if they want, but it doesn't affect the prayer or anything. So if they don't wash it right away, then they want to pray, they can pray in it. If it gets on the floor or on the couch or somewhere, they don't have to wash it off. Yeah.
So correct opinion is tahir.
That's what I see. Yeah.
Actually, most of the recent ones, or lots of the recent ones, they start taking this opinion.
Yeah.
That's tahir.
Yeah. Same thing with the blood too. Like now, lots take that it's tahir. Yeah.
What's the reason, like? What's the reason, like the most recent, like they did it?
Allahu Alam, maybe exactly, but it seems maybe there's less to madhab, like there's less following of madhab very strictly.
Yeah.
And people started breaking away from that a lot. So if you break away from that and you follow strictly the evidence, then Allahu Alam, it's you start to look at things a little bit differently.
What about maybe even scientifically, maybe lots of things that have been proven or something?
Well, I don't think so. I don't think from that, no. Because it doesn't affect the hukum, right?
Yeah.
Even if something we know it'll kill you, it doesn't make it najas.
No, but what I'm saying is because they consider it najas for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But now we know for a fact that it's not najas.
So how do we know? What does najas mean?
I guess.
It's a hukum shar'i. even if we saw something and we know if you touch this you're going to die. I don't know what it would
It's
be,
not
but
najis.
it doesn't mean it's najis. I mean it's haram. It would be haram to touch because it's harmful, but there's not necessarily a tie between something being harmful or what it's made up of and whether it's najis or not.
Because if we take the opinion that it's tahir, which seems like it's the strongest one,
Yeah.
is this a whole different discussion whether that breaks your wudu?
It's a different discussion. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is about vomit. So now we'll go on to the urine and the feces because the author mentioned them all in the same category. So with regards to adults, then we can say that there's a consensus or there's ijma' that the urine and feces from an adult as well as a baby girl are considered najas. So these three people, there's a consensus, there's no difference of opinion that they're considered najas. This ijma' was mentioned by Imam al-Tahawi and Badr ad-Din al-Ayni and Ibn Rushd and Ibn Juzay and al-Nawawi and al-Hafiz al-Iraqi and Ibn al-Mundhir and al-Zarkashi and al-San'ani and al-Shawkânî and many others. So all of these ulama mentioned that there's an agreement and that no one disputed that with regards to the urine and feces of adults and girls that are unweaned, that they're considered najas.
Feces of adults and unweaned baby girls?
Yeah, so no one ever said that these are considered tahir. The only difference of opinion is with regards to the urine of baby boys that are unweaned or that they haven't been eating food yet. So the vast majority say that it's najas. The only ones that said it was tahir was Imam Dawood ibn Ali al-Asbahani. So he's the Imam of the Zahiri Mad'hab. So he said that it's considered tahir. Also some of the Hanâbilah and Imam Ash-Shawkânî. So these three or these two ulama as well as some of the Hanâbilah considered the urine of a baby boy who's under or hasn't eaten yet, they considered it to be tahir. And so the majority, the evidence that they use is the same evidence that everyone else uses. They use the ijma' that these things are najas, and they use the hadith that we talked about, I think last week or the week before, about the Bedouin when he urinated in the masjid, and the Prophet ﷺ ordered it to be washed. And then even the hadith that we talked about, that the Prophet ﷺ said that water should be sprinkled on it. So they say, well, this shows that it's najas. If it wasn't najas, you wouldn't have to do anything with it. Just like saliva. If saliva gets on clothing, you don't have to sprinkle water on it, you don't have to wash it, you don't have to wipe it off, you don't have to do anything with it. So they say that this is evidence that it's najas. The other ones, like Imam Dawood and the Shawkânî and some of the Hanâbilah, what they say is that the fact that the Prophet ﷺ didn't wash it shows that it's tahir. So that's the argument that they say for that.
Isn't there a difference between sprinkling water on something and washing it?
There's a difference, but does the fact that there's a difference, does that prove that it's
Not
tahir,
najas.
or does it prove that we just wash it differently?
Yeah, exactly. Like that. Yeah, that's what I was trying to point out.
Yeah.
So the washing would be differently.
But it's still najas, because if
Yeah,
it was
it's still
tahir, we
najas,
would just
but
leave it. We don't have to do anything with it.
But that's talking about feces. Those are talking about urine. This is feces. Different.
Yeah. So the only difference is the urine of a baby boy that the
Are
other
we talking about feces right now or urine?
both.
Both.
Oh, both.
So
You
there's
say
there's
both.
ijma' on everything from everybody. The only difference was urine for baby boy that hasn't eaten yet.
Didn't we already conclude the urine though?
We talked about urine.
We talked about that
Hadith.
just that it's different for boys and girls.
Oh, okay.
That's all. Yeah.
But so is the feces of the unweaned baby boy, is that najas?
Yeah. There's no. It's the same as everything else.
So only the urine of the
Only the
unweaned
urine
boy
is
the
different.
sprinkle. Okay.
Yeah.
Everything is najis.
And even and like
Even
we
the
said
urine
that
is najis, yeah.
even the urine is najas. The
Yeah.
strongest opinion, I take that. I mean, I'm assuming you guys do just what you guys said now.
Yeah.
That because the Prophet, it is urine, so it takes the same as everything else. The only thing is the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that it should be washed in a different way.
Yeah.
That instead of having to wash it thoroughly, you just sprinkle water on it.
Yeah. So then yeah.
Sorry, but هم بالعربي شقي الآدمي وبوله ورجيعه. What's رجيع?
كيف؟
قي الآدمي
ها؟
بوله ورجيعه.
رجيع الغائط.
Oh. والله.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
رجيع الحيوان, they'll so call it sometimes. Like it's the
The pew.
no the
Like, okay.
Qay is vomit.
So
Rajia is the So this is the chapter from the author. If there's any questions about that.
So it's it's najis.
To me, that's what I take, and I don't know if you guys differ. If you do, then
Yeah, I think.
And I think it is najis because the reason why Rasulullah said sprinkle the water on it is just to make it easier for people, nothing else.
Yeah, but he still told us to do something with water.
And it's because it's still najis.
Yeah, if it was, he would. Why would he do anything if it was tahir?
Exactly. Yeah.
I know this is, we're talking about najas right now. We're not talking about what nullifies a wudu.
Yeah.
But because I deal with it every single day,
yeah,
I would just like to know. So if my son, who is feeding, and let's just say he's not feeding, let's assume both.
Yeah.
Okay. If his urine or feces got on my shirt,
yeah,
can I just put water on it, and that doesn't affect my wudu at all?
No, touching najasa doesn't affect wudu at all. It doesn't matter what the najasa is.
Okay.
Whether it's from you, from someone else, whether it's urine, whether it's feces, whether it's from, like having najasa on you, on your clothing, it doesn't affect the wudu.
Okay.
So najasa and wudu are unrelated.
They're unrelated, yeah. The only time they're related is when it comes to salat, because you have to be on wudu and you can't have najasa on you. But in and of themselves, they're not. There's no tie.
So some.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Even if suppose I'm washing my mother feces or something,
Yeah.
I'm touching, my wudu is not going to break.
No. Doesn't touching anything najas doesn't break your wudu. It just has to be off if you're going to pray, but you don't have to make wudu again though. Yeah.
And the other question I have is any limit for the baby boy, because some starts eating at the age of 4 months.
Yeah.
So what's the age?
It would be whenever they start eating. So if you had a baby and you fed them at 2 months, it would be 2 months for that baby. If you didn't feed them until 8, it would be good until 8 months old. So it's not based on the age. It's based on only on the food. Yeah.
She asked about the sprinkle, right? Sprinkling?
What about it?
No, what was her question? I didn't even hear the question. Like the second one about the 2 months, 8 months.
Oh yeah, like what is the age limit for when you sprinkle and wash?
Yeah, okay.
So that, like I said,
So
that there's no age limit. It's only
2
to
years.
do. Yeah, even say they didn't eat solid food for 2 years.
Okay.
Then I mean you wouldn't.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll stop there then.